Relationships. I mean, am I right? Seriously, relationships are great, right? Who doesn't love a little love? Finding your person. They're your best friend, the love of your life. You have a partner, a supportive backbone, maybe even like a ride or die. Anybody out there having that experience? Anybody? No? Okay, cool. Me neither. Okay, I'm just kidding. Contrary to what many of us have experienced so far in life, true, long-lasting love does exist. It is real, and it is achievable. And thank the Lord, because I wholeheartedly believe that love is the #1 goal of what we are meant to learn here on this earth. So, of course, that's what we all hope to achieve, or most of us, I would say. Now, because of that fact, would it be likely that love would be something that would just happen on a whim? You know, do you think so?
Yes.
Each of us have a right one that we're just destined to find here out of this sea of 8 billion people. And when you find them, it just works. Love. And all the people that it doesn't work with, that you have conflict with, and it's hard, and you clashing, those just aren't the right one. If it's hard, it can be the right one. This isn't my person. We're fighting. We don't get along. We don't see things the same way. How many times have you heard the saying, anything worth having will just come so easily to you?
Huh?
You guys heard that one? It's just going to fall in your lap. It's going to take minimal effort. You shouldn't have to change anything about yourself. And you should just give up when it's difficult. How many times have we heard that saying? Never. You have never heard that in your life. Don't lie to me, because that's not a saying. That wouldn't make any sense. No, obviously the greatest, most powerful, highest level of fulfillment, most sought after thing takes work. It doesn't come easy. It's not just gonna happen. It's not just gonna fall in your lap. It will be very hard sometimes. It has to be. It will sometimes cause you intense discomfort, sacrifice, intense pain. But once you can understand that, and you can understand its value, then at that point you're already a lot better off than most. Because that notion about love, that can be really intimidating. That can be really stressful for people. Obviously people, they get hurt a few times in relationships and they're like, I am done.
Get away from me.
I'm tapped out.
I don't want to get hurt again.
And then they just get in this cycle of like,
as soon as I see a red flag, I'm out.
you're always going to come across something that doesn't align. You can't align perfectly with anybody. Those are fairy tales. That's not how the real world is. That can be scary. And that can lead people sometimes to be like,
I'm good. I don't need love.
but what if you knew what to keep out of your relationship? When you see it, you knew how to spot it, and you knew exactly how to work through it and get it out. Don't you think that would make it a little bit easier? Make you feel a little bit more secure? You could feel confident to get into a relationship and know that you would have the tools to do the work that will keep you in that relationship. Well, a very brilliant couple that has stood the test of time, known as Julie and John Gottman. They are the founders of the Gottman Institute, which is a marriage and relationship institution where they train with the most state-of-the-art, groundbreaking, innovative, and modern methods that were developed by Julie and John themselves from studying in the field, from counseling in the field for many years, and from simply having the walk to talk the talk, because they have been in their marriage successfully and learned from what they experienced. And then they developed methods to help others. They've won many awards. They've been married successfully for 36 years. I'd say anybody who's been married that long, I don't care if you're a therapist or a psychologist or not, or if you have doctor in front of your name, I think you'd probably be a good person to talk to about relationships and how to make them last. And what are the secrets that have worked for you? What are the things that you've noticed amongst couples that succeed and make it in the long run? And what have you noticed amongst couples that don't? What is the pattern? What are you seeing? And that is exactly how they developed something that they call the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse of relationships. Dun dun dun. So it sounds really intimidating. And it is. What? Because if any of these horsemen,
Well,
jail. If any of these four horsemen show up at your door of your relationship, block it. They need to get out. They're not welcome, because they're going to tear it apart. They're going to cause the apocalypse of your relationship, which means it's over. The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse is something out of Christianity, conquest, war. What are the other two? Ooh, I forgot. Conquest, war, famine, and death. And so these were said to be the 4 concepts that would cause a society to fall and to be destroyed. So when John and Julie Gottman came up with this concept for what to watch out for in relationships to make sure that your relationships don't fail, since there were 4 different things, they adopted this name to that concept as well. So the four horsemen of the apocalypse of relationships are the four things that you want to be very aware of in your relationships so that you can spot them when they happen and you can know how to nip them in the bud because they will be the demise of that relationship. They actually took data, and John Gottman has asserted many times that he can sit in with married couples for, I don't know if this is the exact time period, but I think it was something like 15 to 30 minutes and just hear how they interact, hear how they have a conflict, hear how they talk to each other, watch their mannerisms, and he can determine, based on the four horsemen, whether or not that relationship is going to be successful or if it is going to end in divorce. And his predictability has been proven, they say, to be about a 90% accuracy. So out of thousands, and I don't even know how many thousands of people that he has run this test on and made these predictions, he has been 90% accurate when basing it upon the Four Horsemen and a couple of other concepts. But this is one of their biggest concepts. And so it's so interesting. And when you have data like that, and you are aware of this number, like 90%, that's a huge number in the grand scheme of things. That is a wild statistic. That is very high. There's not a lot of things that you get to say are 90% accurate. I would say this would be a good model to follow. And this would be something that would be very useful to know while going through your relationships if you would like to see your relationship last and stand the test of time. So I'm going to tell you the four horsemen of the apocalypse of relationships based on John and Julie Gottman's theory. I'm going to explain what each one looks like, what it sounds like. So if you're ready, I'm ready. Let's get into it. So way back, maybe like a year ago almost now, I had started to do a series on the Four Horsemen, and I had gotten through criticism and stonewalling, and then I didn't do the last two. So this is my makeup for that. I'm just going to do all four in one video. If you do want to take a deeper dive into either criticism or stonewalling, I'll put them up here. I'm sorry. I'll put them up here. Okay. This corner, I think. Yeah. Now, horseman number one is, we're going to start with criticism. And this is the horseman that is likely to show up first out of all. It is the easiest horseman to get out of hand with without noticing it. You might hear the word criticism and you might think,
Okay, well, literally, I can't ever criticize my partner. People do things wrong and they need to be held accountable. And you can't just always be talking like so nice and lovey to someone. People mess up and you have to tell them. You should be able to freely tell your partner, like,
Hey, you're kind of messing up here. Hey, you shouldn't speak to me like that. Hey, you did this and you said you wouldn't. Hey, da-da-da.
you know, I can't ever criticize somebody. Like, that's ridiculous.
something that's really important, and I talk about it a lot, is word choice. And making sure that the words that we choose, we know what they mean to us, and the words that someone else is using with us when we're in that same conversation, that they have the same understanding of what those words mean. Okay? So to understand these concepts, we need to know what John Gottman is referring to when he's using the word criticism. When I first started exploring, before I knew anything about the Four Horsemen, I would say that criticism is just when you're telling somebody something that they're doing that you believe is wrong or not useful or hurtful or something negative. So when we look in the dictionary version of the word criticism, there's a few different kinds of criticism that it differentiates: constructive criticism and then destructive criticism. So the basic definition of criticism is the expression of disapproval of someone or something based on perceived faults or mistakes. The reason that there are two types is really, I think, based on that word perceived, because the reason that criticism can be so dangerous in a relationship when being dealt out to someone that you supposedly care for and love, and you should care about how they feel and their happiness. You have to remember that criticism is coming from your own opinion. It's the way you are perceiving things, and you are ultimately making a judgment. Sometimes it may not be in certain times, but sometimes if you're not communicating first, you could be perceiving faults. The difference between constructive and destructive criticism is that constructive criticism offers specific feedback and actionable advice with the purpose of helping someone improve their performance or their behavior in some way. It has a specific intention behind it that is genuinely based in being either worried about how another person is behaving or just, in a sense, looking out for that person because you do genuinely care about them. And then Destructive criticism is based in anger, based in judgment, and based in a reaction. It's usually going to happen without communicating. It's going to be based on a completely perceived judgment call on that person, and it's going to be about tearing someone down. It's going to be about pointing out flaws, and it's going to have no real actionable advice attached to it. No solutions really attached to it. I mean, it might, but if it's tearing them down, it doesn't matter. It's still going to be destructive. If it's just about pointing out how they mess up and what their faults are. And destructive criticism usually takes place when assumptions are made and there's not a good communication facilitated between the two. So when I learned about John Gottman and Julie Gottman's version of criticism, I learned something really important about how to differentiate between the two as well. And the way they separate the concepts more is what is not okay is criticism, which I'm going to define how they define it. And what is okay is raising concerns, opening a dialogue without blame and fault, and just discussing and holding people accountable in a very non-judgmental way based on actions that have been observed, not just loose statements and accusations. Raising a concern is completely normal and needed in a relationship. And it's a thing that you should do anytime something like that is weighing on you at a chosen time where you can have a conversation. And there's nothing wrong with that. For example, let's say that you and your partner have agreed that when you're having conversations, you're going to keep your voice at a certain level. You're not going to raise your voice and yell at each other during conflicts or conflict resolution. And then one of you notices that the other is doing this. They're still raising their voice at times. They're still taking it to that level. And you've both willingly agreed to this, and this is something that you have agreed to hold each other accountable for. Then in a moment when you guys are having a conversation, the partner that is noticing that can say,
hey, I just noticed that we came to an agreement that we're not going to raise our voice when we have arguments. And on Wednesday, when we talked about such and such, I noticed your voice elevating a bit. And whenever voices get raised during arguments, it makes me shut down. I feel very unsafe. I feel very uneasy. I feel very worried, and I get a lot of anxiety. And it just doesn't make for a good conflict resolution.
And then you let the person answer for that. And there's nothing wrong with doing that. So that same situation, done as one of the Four Horsemen, criticism, would go something like this.
You always raise your voice. You're always yelling at me. And all you ever do is just scream and yell. And you said you wouldn't do it, and you did it again. You're such a liar, and I'm sick of it. And if you don't stop doing that, I'm literally not going to talk to you anymore.
That is wildly different in a way to approach that same exact issue. And one is going to facilitate a very useful conversation that you could actually get somewhere with and actually maybe resolve that problem. And one is going to tear another person down, make them feel very ashamed, probably make them defensive, which is going to lead into one of the other Four Horsemen that goes hand in hand with this one, and just facilitate a more elevated argument, continue to not resolve the problem, and likely lead you down a path that is going to lead to that relationship ultimately failing. So when you hear it laid out like that, it's very evident why you would want to select one way of handling that over the other. The other is just going to get you nothing but what you don't want, and the first one is going to get you everything you do want. So hello, you're going to go with raising the concern in a healthy way rather than criticizing. So the main difference between raising a concern and a criticism is that when you're criticizing someone, you are attacking them at who they are. You are taking a behavior that they've done, you're jumping to conclusions about it without discussing it. You're making assumptions, and you're tying it to who they are as a person. And then you are attacking them at their core. You are saying,
this behavior means you are this. You are this way. I have made this ultimate judgment upon you and decided that you are this type of a person because you do this thing.
Instead of focusing on the behavior as the problem, joining with your partner and saying,
hey, this thing is happening again that we agreed is not good for our relationship, and how are we going to handle it?
You guys are together against the issue, which is the behavior, not
I'm against you because you're a bad person.
So just telling someone something negative or pointing out a negative behavior is not criticism in terms of the Four Horsemen. But attacking someone and making a judgment call on them, who they are as a person, blame, and then shaming them and things like that, that is what is criticism. And if you look back at your relationships and some of the ones that have failed, I would bet that criticism probably played a role, because I know it did in mine on both ends, from me and towards me. It's the first horseman that enters the door, and then if you don't nip that one in the bud, it's all downhill from there. Because you know what is the equally unhealthy, perfect partner to criticism? that comes right after that one is defensiveness. Horseman number 2, probably are all pretty familiar with what defensiveness is, and it's when someone is feeling attacked, they are going to get defensive. They are going to do certain behaviors in reaction to that to deflect that feeling of blame and shame off of them. And they might do this in a number of ways. So one definition of defensiveness in the dictionary is very anxious to challenge or avoid criticism. Someone who seems like they're always the victim. Someone who takes things very offensively, even when they maybe weren't meant to be. Someone who shifts the blame off of themselves. So there's lots of different ways that people can exhibit defensiveness. And it's not always in reaction to criticism or an attack, but it is usually in response to feeling like there was a criticism or an attack. So it's all about perception again. Just like criticism is a behavior that stems out of, first, your perceived faults about that other person. Defensiveness also comes from that person who is being defensive. It comes from their own perception that they have been attacked. And without trying to just hear what that person said and not get offended and try to talk it out and sort it out, they're going to jump to the perception of,
I'm being attacked right now and I have to defend myself.
what does anyone do if you're out on the street and someone starts attacking you? Your first instinct is going to be to defend yourself, fight back. Okay? And that is the same way that we do with verbal attacks or perceived verbal attacks. The really hard part about once one horseman has already entered the arena, like criticism, for instance, whether it came from one side or the other, or both sides are doing it, it's likely to automatically cause the domino effect to lead to the other horseman, and the first one being defensiveness. And it's really easy to say, if you start noticing criticism in your relationship, do not react to it with defensiveness, because then you will have 2 horsemen in your relationship. It's really easy to say that. We can say that all day. I just said it. It was very easy to say. What is not easy is to actually do that, because it's so natural. It is so innately in us to defend ourselves when we are being so-called attacked. When we feel like we are being attacked, we are going to automatically feel the very strong and almost unavoidable urge to defend ourselves. If you have ever been in a cycle of abusive relationships, or even just maybe some toxic relationships that kind of border the line, if that's been your experience, you're going to have these same questions. And there's going to be a lot of actually healthy relationship rules and advice that is going to throw you for a loop and kind of confuse you and not apply in your situation. And then you have to become really aware of the fact that relationships are very nuanced. And it's just a good thing to be aware of in general, because chances are, even if you haven't been in a relationship like that, you might come across someone who has. And that'll just help for a better understanding and empathy and greater ability to connect with more types of people. So it can only elevate you as a person to understand these things. So relationships are nuanced. We all have got to grasp that. And this was one that I had a hard time kind of adapting to the nuance of it and understanding when it doesn't apply. And so I want to differentiate between the different ways that defensiveness can show up in relationships. So the Gottman definition of defensiveness as a horseman is a reaction where someone attempts to protect themselves from a perceived attack by deflecting blame, making excuses, or acting like an innocent victim, often as a response to criticism, which ultimately escalates conflict instead of resolving it. Essentially, it's a way of avoiding responsibility for one's actions by counterattacking and playing the victim. But just to further illustrate how all of these things can be so nuanced, I'm just going to give you a few examples. Just thinking about that one part of it, making excuses. People can have wide-ranging opinions on what is an excuse and what is a valid reason. And it's oftentimes very subjective, but other times it's pretty cut and dry. So is it defensiveness when you are presenting a genuine fact, such as,
I didn't actually say what you're saying I said.
Or
I couldn't arrive there on time because the bus schedule was behind.
or something like that, a genuine reason? No, that's not going to be defensiveness, because you're giving a genuine reason. So it's defensiveness when you're making excuses. It's important. It's not because someone thinks you're making excuses. Someone could think you're making excuses when you're giving a genuine reason, but it's, are you or not? Okay. So if you are making excuses, making up reasons why it's not your fault, when it actually wasn't the bus that was late and you could have just arrived on time, you know that the bus comes between these times and you've already known that for a long time, and you arrived a little bit into that time period and you missed the bus and now you're late and now you're blaming it on the bus. Okay, that's an excuse, and that's for you to recognize. Okay, but if you arrived on time and the bus was late, or the bus left early or something like that, that's a genuine reason. If your reason for something is something that you had no control over, that there was no possible reasonable way that you could have known or expected that, that's not an excuse. That is just expressing a valid reason of something that went wrong that was not in your control. Okay, so there's differentiation there. For example, you're working somewhere and let's say you're the boss and one of your employees just late repeatedly. They keep coming in late. They're late multiple times a week. You've already warned them. They've given many excuses, reasons, but also you've warned them and you've let them know,
Okay, I hear you. I'm sorry that happened to you, but you cannot be late. I need you to be on time. It's your responsibility to get here on time. You need to do what you need to do.
maybe their car broke down and you excused that 1 or 2 times. But then other times it was that their child was sick that morning. Okay, you excused that. But then it's like more and more and more and more. And then so they're late and they've been late so many times. You've given them many warnings. It's like their final warning or something. And they're like,
Sorry, my alarm didn't go off.
is that an excuse or is that a valid reason when there's a pattern there? It might be true, but also they've given that reason many times. It comes to a certain point where you're like,
Okay, I understand that your alarm is faulty at times. I understand that you've changed alarms and you've had other alarms not go off. Even when you switched alarms, you used something else as an alarm and then that alarm failed. I get it. Alarms fail sometimes. It's still your responsibility to be here on time.
if you have a phone that has a faulty battery and your phone's dying and then it doesn't go off for your alarm, you need to get a new phone or you're not probably going to be employed much longer. You need to resolve it. It's not your boss's responsibility to figure that out for you. And at some point, many people would call that an excuse, even if that is what really happened. So, but that person who's feeling like,
I'm trying so hard. I feel so like all the bad luck is raining down upon me because these things keep happening to me. And I'm really trying. But my alarm really didn't go off. Like, that's so unfair.
and that person might feel like they're not making an excuse. They're telling a valid reason. Okay, so that's how it can be very nuanced. And then think of the scenario where someone is blaming you for something that was completely out of your control, and it could be subjective. There's a lot of people that still, even in 2025, are very in the dark and very outdated about what they understand and I can be empathetic about in regards to mental health struggles. And so maybe 2 friends, let's say, one friend is often overwhelmed with anxiety and has to cancel things. And maybe even if they do it in a reasonable way in some people's eyes, like they communicate about it, they let the person know earlier in the day or maybe even the day before if they can. It's kind of tough to do that if it's like an anxiety issue where it's coming up upon the situation. But let's say that they do their best. I mean, maybe they're still working out their medication or they're in the middle of therapy and they're trying, but they're struggling. That friend may not fully grasp anxiety and they may look at that as like,
Okay, look, well, you're just making excuses. You just flake on me all the time. You're not there for me. You've missed some of my most monumental events in my life that I needed you there for as my friend. And it's really hurt my feelings.
the other friend with anxiety might respond back,
I don't mean to not be there for you. I'm really struggling with anxiety. I don't think it's very fair for you to hold that against me. I'm doing my best.
one person is going to determine.
That is defensiveness. You're being defensive. You're not hearing how you've hurt me as a friend. You're not hearing how I feel. You're making an excuse.
Defensiveness. And it's going to likely have the effect that defensiveness has because that person doesn't feel validated and the other person in their eyes is making excuses. So the problem's not getting resolved. Okay. And from an outsider looking in, that's a little tough because I get that other person, they might know about defensiveness. They might know about Julie Gottman. They might know all of these things, but they might genuinely feel like they are doing their best and they are struggling with an actual mental disorder. They are struggling. They've been diagnosed even maybe with anxiety and it's severe and they are trying, but they are still hurting their friend. They don't want to be. So it may be a valid reason. So in that case, they might say,
Well, I wasn't being defensive. This is valid. So I'm not introducing one of the Four Horsemen. I am simply defending myself because they're saying I'm a bad friend.
now in that situation, if that person never said,
You're a bad friend.
but then that's how that person took it, they are being defensive. Because what would probably be best, even in that nuanced situation, would be to just hear out your friend and not bring up your anxiety, even if it is valid, and focus more on how your friend is feeling. Even if you don't feel like it's fair to put it on you, you can still acknowledge that your anxiety and your actions and your limitations due to your anxiety have hurt your friend, even if they're not in your control. You can still acknowledge that, and that would probably be the only way to navigate that situation. You can feel defensive, you can feel it inside, but it's about how you respond. So even if what they've said kind of hurts your feelings, makes you feel ashamed, makes you feel attacked, it's all about how you respond. But this one always raised a lot of feelings in me because I know there's so many nuanced situations where that's just not always probable or possible. And I can think of so many real life examples where it would be either unhealthy and not good for me to respond to certain criticisms I've experienced in a validating way. And then other times where it just would be very difficult to do so, but would ultimately probably be the best thing to do to actually reach a resolution. So there's a few different scenarios. So scenario number 1, someone is raising a concern with you and you interpret it as a criticism because it makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel unfairly attacked. It makes you feel ashamed. You respond to that by claiming that it wasn't fair because this and this happened. Or you respond by saying,
You just blame me for everything.
or you respond by saying,
You do that all the time. How can you get mad at me when I do it one time?
or you respond by saying,
You're so hard on me. I can't do anything right. You just get mad at everything I do.
or you just throw out an insult at them that has nothing to do with anything really. So we're going to call that scenario perceived criticism. That's how this horseman can enter the relationship when criticism didn't enter. So it can enter it all on its own. But one partner might think that criticism entered. They might think that criticism is there. So to them, and perception is reality, they will believe that they're just reacting to the horseman that's already present. But in the other person's reality, defensiveness came in on its own. Okay, so sometimes that can be the case. This can happen also, like kind of a side note to this one. This can be when someone's not even raising a complaint. People who are overly defensive. Like, have you ever dealt with someone that you felt like you were walking on eggshells with? That you felt like even when you're saying something completely non-confrontational, you're maybe even trying not to be. You're like overly trying not to be. You're really choosing your words because you know this person gets this way. You might even just be saying something to them that's so mundane sometimes that you don't even expect this to be coming, and they still get defensive. Like, for example, let's say you're studying for an exam or something, and you want to let everybody know that's going to be in the house that you're going to be studying and you just need to focus. So just don't make a lot of noise right outside your door or come and knock on your door or something like that. You're just like pre-letting people know to avoid having any type of issue and just to communicate. Let's say you have a few roommates, and when you tell roommate number 1 and roommate number 2, they're like,
Oh, yeah, that's cool. Okay, yeah, we got you. Thanks for letting us know.
but then when you tell roommate number 3, they're like,
Okay. Do I make a lot of noise outside your door or something?
No.
I don't know why you're targeting me.
I told everyone, not just you.
You're literally the loudest person in this house. Why do you need to tell me that? I'm obviously not going to do that.
or, something like that. Or they say something like,
Okay. Sorry I bother you so much. I won't knock on your door anymore.
No, I just don't want anyone to knock on my door for the next 2 hours.
they don't want to hear that. And they're just like,
Yeah, okay. It seems like it's pretty aimed at me. If you don't want me to bother you, you could just say that.
I am saying that right now, but only for right now. Like, I'm sure we've all come across a person like that, or had a person like that in our lives, in our family, and been in a relationship with someone like that, or had a friend like that, where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not meaning it like that. Like, why are you getting upset? Why did you answer me like that? Why did you say that? So that's another way defensiveness can enter when criticism is not already there. Number 2, the way defensiveness can enter is the way we talked about in the beginning. Someone's criticizing you. They are criticizing you. So criticism has entered. They are pointing out things that you are doing that maybe you messed up on. You're making little mistakes. Everyone's going to do it. They're going to do it. You're going to do it. It's all about how you address it. So they're addressing it by criticizing you. Okay? And that hurts. And it's picking at your insecurities. It's definitely triggering you because you didn't mean to do it and you already feel bad about it. Everyone has bad habits, and sometimes bad habits die hard. Okay? So you might have said, I won't do this anymore, but you accidentally did it. And it's not that they're pointing out something that is not true. It's the way that they're doing it. And if they're doing it by criticizing you, that is going to cause problems in your relationship. And so that might be when you get defensive. Instead of taking the responsibility for that, which will be difficult in that situation when someone is bringing it up like that, it's natural that you're going to get defensive because that's something that you're insecure about. You already feel bad about it. You already feel bad that you do that. You already want to change it about yourself, and you know you've done it, and you might be beating yourself up about it. Maybe you hadn't gotten a chance to bring it up yet, but they're criticizing you about it. And all that shame is building up in you. It's likely that if you haven't practiced this principle, you're going to get defensive, and you're going to say,
Why are you being so rude? Why are you yelling at me about that? Why are you saying that means that I'm neglectful? I'm not neglectful. I just did it one time. You do this all the time, so how can you say that about me?
And it's really natural. I want to say it's really natural. If someone is criticizing you and making judgment calls on who you are as a person because you made a mistake, it's really natural to want to point out the mistakes that they make. It feels really like a good solution to us when someone's pointing out bad behavior that you've done when you did it on accident, and maybe you didn't point out all these things that they did because you gave them a pass because you understand that it's hard to break habits and you were being so understanding about that. It's natural that when they then pick apart who you are because you messed up, that you're going to want to point that out. You're going to want to be like,
why are you being so hard on me? I don't say anything when you do this and that.
It's not to say that it's not natural and not very tempting to do so. It seems really reasonable to do so. But the thing is that gets you nowhere. Okay, now, scenario number 3. Your partner is criticizing you. They're doing it by definition of John Gottman's definition of criticism. They actually are attacking you. But they're doing it over something you either did not do, or they are skewing in such a way that is completely unfair. And in this scenario, I would say it is most likely going to be emotionally abusive. So they're not criticizing you about things that you messed up on, and you know you messed up, but they're just doing it in a really rude way. This is not that. This is the scenario where they are attacking you, and it is very unfair, and they are skewing things, gaslighting you, blaming everything on you, picking on you. And they are doing it to erode your sense of self and to manipulate you and control you and kick you down. And that is the effect it is having. So in this case, this is not what John Gottman is defining when he's talking about defensiveness. So when you are enduring that behavior in a relationship like that, and you then go to defend yourself by saying,
I didn't say that. That's not what I did. You're always attacking me.
And they are. So when you say that, it's just a true statement because they are constantly attacking you. You notice that they're constantly making you the butt of every joke, and you say that.
You're making me the butt of every joke. Why are you making that joke about me?
Or you're standing up for yourself. You're saying,
stop attacking me. Stop saying that about me. Don't tell me that that's how I am, because I didn't even do what you're saying I did.
That is not defensiveness. That is defending yourself against an attack. That is an actual attack, not a perceived attack. That is an attack. So when you are recognizing that you are in a relationship where you are often legitimately being attacked, it's no longer about not being defensive. Because in those situations, if you watch one of my other episodes talking about validation and how validation is the answer in conflict resolution, that does not apply. The one time you do not validate, where it will actually be more harmful to you, is when someone is being emotionally abusive to you. When someone's goal behind their behavior is to make you lower than them so they can feel superior to you because they are actually themselves internally insecure, but they act like they're just so much better than you. But really, the only reason that people would ever behave that way is because they're very insecure, okay? They just exhibit it in a very different way than you do. So in those situations, you do not validate that. You're not going to want to sit there and go,
okay, I understand how you feel. I understand why you might feel that way.
And some people might say,
well, why not? Their feelings are valid too.
Their feelings are valid, but it's not going to matter. Okay, because the reason to validate someone else is to exhibit care and consideration for their feelings, to strengthen the relationship, to strengthen the bond, to make the relationship feel emotionally safe, because that way that person can feel like
I can share my feelings and I will be heard, I will be validated.
And then the other very key part to that is that this is a relationship. So in a healthy relationship, what that would facilitate is that then that person also reciprocates that. And what a person who is being emotionally abusive, being manipulative, and trying to control you, and that's actually their goal in criticizing you this way, unfairly, no amount of validation is ever going to make them reciprocate that to you. No amount of validation is going to change this behavior in them. It will not matter if you do not become defensive. It will not matter if you validate everything they say. It will not matter if you try to do anything. You could react in the most unhealthy of ways, or you could react in the most healthy of ways. You could never do another thing wrong. You could do everything wrong. The point is, that will not change this type of a person. Nothing that you do is influencing this person's behavior, who this person is, and the fact that they want to emotionally abuse you, because people who do that will do that to anyone they are with. It has nothing to do with you or your behavior. They are going to find a way. They are going to find an outlet. They are going to find a reason. Okay? So it doesn't matter what you do. And actually, if you start playing into it and validating them, you're facilitating actually for it to be much easier for them to abuse you further and worse, because they see that worked, that they got the result they wanted, and they'll actually sometimes even escalate. If you give them the reaction that they want, which is like, groveling and saying that they're right and you're sorry and you apologize, that sometimes boosts it in them, and it makes them feel validated in abusing you, and then they feel like they can do it more because they got away with it. And it's a rough situation. This episode is not meant to be about abuse. I'm not going to go too far into that because It's a whole episode of its own, and I have many about that topic. The point is, though, that is not what we're talking about here. If you've been in a relationship like that and you're sitting here wondering,
how am I supposed to not be defensive when someone's attacking me every day?
Definitely not asking you to be doing that, because that just does not even fit into this scenario. It's a totally different ballgame. So I will have some links in the description if that is your case. Check that out, or check out one of my other episodes that has to do with abuse. I have many, and there will be a lot more of a deep dive into how to handle situations like that. These principles will not work in a relationship like that. It will not matter what you do. If that is the case, that is not going to resolve it. I mean it. And if you don't know this, please hear this. Nothing that you can do is going to stop this person from the way that they're treating you, because it is not your fault that they're treating you that way, and it is nothing that you have done that made them be this way towards you. That is 100% on them, and it is their problem, and it is within them. It is an issue that they have. And they would do it to anyone that they're with, okay? So please, do not take this as,
I need to be less defensive while my partner is being abusive towards me.
no, absolutely not, okay? And my heart goes out to you if you're in that situation. I know it's so hard and confusing. We're going to move on to our third horseman. It's the one that tends to oftentimes follow the cycle of criticism and defensiveness. Stonewalling. Now, like I said, I did a whole episode on stonewalling, and I wasn't even really that far into my recordings at that point. Like, I'd barely made that many. I was pretty brand new still. That video kind of went hard. I think you should definitely check it out. It's right here. And if you want to know more about stonewalling, you want to take a deeper dive. Actually, that video stood out to some people because it examined stonewalling, how to handle it if you are the one being stonewalled. And it also spoke on how to recognize when you are stonewalling, if you are the stonewaller. Like if you, the stonewaller. I want to be a baller, a stonewaller. I can't with myself right now. That was clever. Alright, whatever. I can't stop rhyming, okay? I can't stop rapping. You cannot stop me. Stonewallers, I want to take this moment, to remind you that if you are liking this content and you want to see me more, you want to see me break out of my shell more, you want to see me get further in my YouTube career, you want to see some better sets, some better equipment, you want to see this thing go somewhere, I need you to subscribe, okay? I really need you to, and I really appreciate you. And I don't just want viewers watching, I want people that are interacting. I want to know what you got out of my videos, how they're helping you, what you think I should do differently. I want to form a community. I want it to be people that hear each other's stories and connect. I want the whole kit and caboodle, if that's something that anyone on this planet says still. That is what I want. And so it all starts with you subscribing, please, okay? And this is not an ad, but it is a plea. Please subscribe, okay? Thank you so much. All right, what is stonewalling as one of the four horsemen? And it is when someone withdraws from a conversation or relationship to avoid conflict. In the language of psychology, in that terminology, there's lots of different reasons why people might stonewall, and it might not just be to be avoidant of conflict, but that is based in the root of it usually. But sometimes there's something deeper than that. And so that's another really cool thing about the video where I did the deep dive, is I went into all of the many underlying reasons that stonewalling could be happening, so that if you can figure out why someone's doing it, or you can figure out why you're doing it, it's easier to attack as a problem and kind of work it out. So avoiding conflict is a very high cause for stonewalling. And that is why we say that stonewalling is often the next horseman to prance its little hooves right into your relationship, sometimes after criticism and the defensiveness. They're going to get together like a little toxic couple of horses, and they're going to mate, okay? And then they're going to produce a baby. Stonewalling. That's where babies come from, baby horses. This is not like the happy birth story. This is like Rosemary's Baby, okay? You don't want this to happen. Because stonewalling is terrible. And the thing about stonewalling is that people often do it out of necessity. They feel like they don't know how to do anything else, and they may not be doing it always to do something callous or cruel or rude to their partner or intentionally. Sometimes people don't even know they're doing it. It's just what they've always done. It's what they've always learned. People who stonewall the absolute most are going to be your more avoidant attached people. So if you're in a relationship with someone who has a secure attachment, you're probably not going to see much stonewalling. Maybe they might slip into it now and then. Everyone's human, and attachment is often on a spectrum, like most things. So even securely attached people, or mostly securely attached people, can sometimes slip into stonewalling. But the most often to stonewall will be your dismissive avoidant attached partners and your fearful avoidant attached partners that lean more towards their avoidant side. People who will almost never stonewall unless for just like a very short, very superficial amount of time is your anxious people. Poor anxious attachment. They're not going to stonewall you because they literally can't stop talking to you. They don't ever want to be away from you. So they're not going to stonewall you. They're not going to avoid talking to you. Even if it's a conflict, they want to talk to you. They want to have that conflict. They want to get it out of the way because they want to get closer to you. They want to like always be near you. And even when they're near you, they want to be more near to you. So they want to like crawl inside your skin and wear it. And then it's still not close enough. Okay, so they're not going to stonewall you. They want to be with you, intermingled all the time. So usually this is going to come from your avoidant. Okay, now the way a person can stonewall is it could be in the form of physically leaving. So they might leave suddenly when you have a conflict. They might just stay away. They might avoid you. If you guys live together, they might just have things to do, like outside of the house. And they just might constantly leave and just be gone for long periods of time and not tell you where they're going, not speak to you, not tell you what they're doing, keep you in like a state of panic kind of, and just avoiding it and not addressing the issue. They suddenly have to work longer. They suddenly have all these errands to run and all these things to do. And they just can't pause for a minute to have this conversation that they know you want to have and that they need to have because it's a relationship. They could stop responding to you. Like if you're not together, if you're not in the same household, maybe if you guys are usually texting a lot, they might just stop answering you. They might block your phone number temporarily. They might put you on D&D, do not disturb. They might take an unusually long time to get back to you, and then they might avoid what you actually ask and maybe put you off indefinitely. Like if normally you guys hang out multiple times a week, you might be like,
Hey, what's going on? Do you want to hang out?
and they might just take a really long time to answer that question. And then when they do, they might be like,
I'm really tired tonight.
and you don't think anything of that. But then the next night they have a different excuse. And then the next night a different excuse. And you're just like,
Like, what's going on?
but then when you ask,
What's the problem?
they're just like,
Oh, no, then there's no problem.
and they won't tell you, but then they're not talking to you. They're not engaging with you. Sometimes stonewalling can look like you're right in the middle of a conversation and they just shut down. So they just stop answering you right in front of your face. That can happen. Literally, you can be asking them questions and they can just be blatantly not responding to you. That's a pretty cold form of stonewalling. It's the silent treatment. It's when someone just decides they are going to totally ice you out. And this one's usually pretty overt. It's not one of those where they're kind of just pretending nothing's wrong but avoiding you. This is like directly meant to make a statement, and they will be directly ignoring you. And when you guys enter a room together, they will not be acknowledging you. And when you speak directly to them, they will not respond. So that's kind of the most severe form of stonewalling, I'd say, and that is in the form of the silent treatment. Stonewalling is a particularly harmful one of the Four Horsemen because whereas criticism and defensiveness do kind of dance along the lines sometimes of emotional abuse, they can cross over it and they can be just kind of grazing the line of it, but usually not too severe. Criticism could be, but stonewalling is definitely determined as a form of emotional abuse when in a relationship. If you are stonewalling your partner that is emotionally abusive, it is going to be hurtful to your partner. It's going to make them feel like something's happening to them that they don't have any control over. It's not fair. It's definitely not conducive to a healthy relationship. And it is really just removing all sense of input on your partner's part. Like they can't do anything about it when you're doing that. You're forcing that upon them and they just have to accept it because you're not allowing for any other option. So that is definitely going to have its emotional impacts. If it's done over and over again in the relationship, I don't necessarily need to read the effects that this has on people. I definitely lived it. So I know exactly what stonewalling will cause you to do and how you end up reacting to it and how it has its effects on you over time. And it will definitely tear down your relationship. For one, it erodes all sense of belief and trust that your partner has in you. Your partner is going to start to believe that you cannot and will not and are not willing to work through problems with them. You don't possess the skills or the wherewithal or the motivation to properly handle a conflict resolution and work through the hard times. They're going to start to see that. And it's natural that when someone just ices you out like that, that partner is going to start to feel like they're unimportant to you, that you'd rather go days at a time not even interacting with them, not being close to them, not resolving a problem problem, while they're going to be probably wanting to resolve that very badly because they are going to want to be back close with you because they love you. And they're going to start to observe that you avoiding conflict is taking a precedence over facing it so that you can be close again. And they're going to start to feel like your bond is not important. And that just leads them to start to feel like maybe you don't care about them as much as you said you did. Maybe you don't love them as much as you claim to. When someone is left so isolated like that, when they're supposed to be in a partnership time after time again, they're either going to leave and get out of there. They're going to probably eventually do that anyway, but first it's going to be hard to do that. They're going to really want to work it out and it's going to hurt them really bad. So they're probably going to try to stick it out at least, and that is a painful time doing that and being stonewalled while doing that. Eventually they're going to try to cope while in that relationship. They might start spending a lot of their time with other people. They might facilitate more time with their friends more often, their family members more often, people who treat them like they're worth being around, people who give them respect when they speak to them, people who want to hear about their day, people who don't mind if a little conflict arises and they just talk about it, and that shows that they care about that relationship. They're just going to want to be around someone that makes them feel like they're worth something because their partner is treating them like they're not even there. They're treating them like they're invisible, all to avoid a conflict, all to avoid accountability for something, all to just sometimes to punish. People oftentimes use stonewalling as a form of punishment, and that's where this is going to cross over definitely into emotional abuse, and some of these antidotes will not work in that situation. Over time, every time you just leave your partner in the cold like that, you're just creating a dynamic where you're in this relationship, so to speak, but one person is trying to live a separate life. They're making it happen, and the other person is simply coping with that, and you just become two single people that aren't connected, that are just under the guise of a relationship. You're not a partnership anymore, and it's really hard to bring that back into sync once someone has been forced into that, to be able to kind of live out every day in that situation. I know for me, it was a hard thing to cope with. I loved the person I was with, and I hated being treated like that. I longed every day to live the life that we were supposed to be living, to be interacting happily, to be enjoying our lives, and nothing I tried was working, and I couldn't get past the wall most times. And so I didn't have to try. I'm telling you, I was literally forced. It felt that way to me, because otherwise I'd be crying every day. I'd be making a fool of myself while I was being rejected and made to feel like someone who didn't matter constantly. So I naturally coped by spending time away and throwing myself into certain things. It was a horrible experience. 0 out of 10. I would not recommend to anyone, but the fact that I had to experience it, I tried to find the good things that came out of it, and some things that came out of it were I got to know some parts of myself very well, because I spent so much time just trying to keep my mind occupied and find other things to pour all that love and passion I had inside of me for my partner that was not accepting it at the time. And I poured it into other things. I poured it into the home we were living in. I poured it into my art. I learned that I was very creative. It's crazy. My heart was breaking, but my creativity blossomed over those 2 years that we lived together. And I never knew I was so creative. I never knew I could do so many things, and that I was so artistic in so many ways. And I guess I grew and got to know another part of myself that maybe I wouldn't have known had I not been in that situation. That's the bright spot that I pick out of it. But it was torture. It was a very sad time of my life, very upsetting, and I was not happy most of the time. Stonewalling, it hurts people. It might sound really mundane just discussing it. If you've never been through it, it's like,
Whatever, someone's ignoring you, get over it.
it's so hurtful when it is the person that you love and you think is your best friend and you're building this life with, and you love them, and that's your source of love. That's who you're in this partnership with. They've agreed to be in this, but they're not being a partner to you, and you just feel like you're alone in a relationship, and it's terrible. I never wanted that. I never signed up for that. So stonewalling, it's going to ruin your relationship for sure, and it doesn't take long to take effect. All right, we have arrived at our final horseman, and this one is not like the rest. This one very rarely, if ever, comes into the relationship all on its own, and John and Julie are very clear. If you let it get to the point where this horseman comes in your door of your relationship, it's pretty much irreversible. There's no going back. That relationship is going to end, and it's going to end in a very sad and toxic way, with a lot of hurt feelings and a lot of negativity, because the fourth horseman of the relationship apocalypse is contempt. What was that? We're all gonna die out here. Contempt. Okay, what is contempt? Well, it's about as scary as I'm making it sound. It's really bad. Contempt is a behavior that expresses disrespect, mockery, or condescension towards your partner, essentially putting yourself on a higher ground above them, often through actions such as name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, or making sarcastic digs or remarks at them. And it is done with the goal of making your partner feel less than, worthless, inferior, and things like that. Contempt is absolutely a form of emotional abuse. That is why they say that when it enters the relationship, there's typically no going back. Now, some of you out there might be hearing this and might be going,
I thought that was criticism.
and if you're saying that, no babe. Criticism would be when you say,
Wow, you do this every time. I guess you just can't seem to learn anything. It seems like you can't commit anything to memory.
okay, contempt is,
Stupid imbecile. Get the up. Oh, you're so sad you're crying. Yeah, get the out of my face. You piece off.
that is contempt. It's a big difference. Okay, the first one is rude. You should never talk to your partner that way. Even the criticism. Contempt is absolutely obnoxious. Should be something that anytime you hear something like that, you would be floored to be talked to that way. Absolutely disrespectful. It's mean. It's when you're being cruel and horrid towards your partner. It shows a pure disdain for them. You thoroughly despise them, and you are showing it in every interaction with them, and that is contempt. This is sure to erode the relationship very quickly. Once you've hit contempt, you are on your way out. There's typically no going back from contempt because contempt causes emotional damage. It causes long-term harm. Words hurt, and there's certain words that you say or ways that you speak to someone that it's hard for them to forget. And so oftentimes there's no going back. You can't go back to the relationship that it was before you said those words. They've left your mouth. And usually contempt doesn't happen just once. It's something that happens and then escalates and then kind of blows up the whole establishment. So it's very dirty, nasty. This is why when you see criticism start to creep in, defensiveness, or even stonewalling, you must stop that immediately. You have to get rid of it, and if you cannot get rid of it, I would honestly suggest leaving far before it reaches contempt, because that's where it's headed. Because all of those things, they breed resentment, they breed anger, they breed frustration, they breed a feeling of,
This isn't fair. I shouldn't be treated this way. I'm tired of going through this.
and eventually you're going to reach contempt. Sadly, in my last relationship, regardless of how hard I fought it, regardless of how much I still felt an attachment and a yearning that I thought was still love, even after I'd been treated pretty badly, I couldn't fight the contempt that I eventually felt for my ex. And something that was really scary about that relationship was that I now realize, looking back, having learned all of these things and then having to look at them in hindsight, he felt contempt for me far before I ever knew that. Far back when I thought we were still in love and that the things that were happening were so confusing to me that I never would have thought he feels contemptuous towards me. And that's why he's behaving that way. That's why he's acting like that. That's why that was weird. And that's why he had that little outburst. And I didn't know that's what it was. And it's just so eerie looking back on it and realizing when the first moment that I started to see his contempt for me pop up. And it was so long before I really realized we were having problems. I don't have feelings for that person anymore romantically. It hurts a certain part of me just knowing that I was so blind, that I was in such a vulnerable place, thinking I was in this very real relationship and thinking it was so the opposite of what it really was. That's so uncanny. Like I talked about in one of my episodes, the uncanny valley. And it's when you see a glimpse of someone who you thought you knew, but for a moment you see a glimpse of some part of them that's off. It's just not what you thought it was. And it's a little uncanny. It's a little unsettling. It's called the uncanny valley. And it's something that is present in people with narcissism or narcissistic behaviors. They tend to show a bit of this. And I remember the first time I ever saw it, and it's contempt. That's what it is. You're seeing the mask slip, they call it, and that mask that they put on where they act like this normal great person that actually likes you and loves you, and for a minute they forget to cover up with that mask, and you see a glimpse of the contempt that they actually feel for you. And you can actually try this on people that you are not sure about how they actually feel about you. You're getting a weird vibe. They act like they love you, they're your best friend, they're your partner, they're whoever, and they just act like every time they're just like,
I love you.
but something about it doesn't feel genuine. And this is a test. It has a name. I saw it somewhere. And I was like,
I know exactly what that is. I've seen that before.
and just in real life. And with this particular person, and I've probably seen it with other people now that I look back, but this one really stood out because it was so recent and so impactful. But there's a little test. It's very subtle. You have to catch them off guard when you're coming to meet them, wherever. Approach them from an angle that they can't see you coming up, okay? And you want to watch for that brief. It's not even, maybe even a second long, but it's that face that they make. The moment that they see you and recognize you, their brain is going to immediately react with the reaction that is natural, the reaction that they actually feel. That emotion is going to come out naturally for just a split second before they are able to cover it with the emotion that they want to display to you. And so with people that actually care about you and love you, this is not going to be any different. The same look that they initially give you is going to be the same one essentially that they end up with. Or it might be like a look of surprise if they didn't know you were coming, but it will be warm. With someone that has contempt for you, that split second that they look at you and they haven't corrected their face yet to the emotion that they want you to think they're having, you're going to see the contempt. They're going to look at you and you're going to see that they look angry. They look stone-faced. They look almost like evil. They look like they have hatred for you. And this happened to me with my ex. I remember it so well. When I had come over to his house, he was always very hospitable. He had always been very gentlemanly up to that point. He'd always come out and greeted me in the front at my car. He would even move his car out of the driveway and let me park in the driveway so that I didn't have to go park on the street. He would go park on the street, and very affectionate, very chivalrous, and walk me back to the back where we would hang out. And I remember the first day that I got to his house and he didn't move out of the driveway because I was used to that. And I wasn't trying to be entitled, but it was just like, it was a weird thing to just suddenly change. It was really hard to find parking by his house. And it was getting into the evening. I had heels on. I'm a woman, and, you know, at night and on this dark street, and I would have to park blocks away. It was just kind of like,
Okay, well, he probably didn't do this on purpose. He just doesn't know I'm here yet.
I call him and I'm like,
What should I do about parking?
and he's just like,
On the street.
and I was like,
Okay.
and I did it. I finally get back up to the front of his house, and I've never just entered his backyard, which he always hung out in the back by his pool. And I've never just gone back there. I'd been over there many times when his friends did that. They would just come right on back, but he always greeted me outside and he always walked me back. So it just wasn't something that I felt very comfortable doing. I called him, no answer. Mind you, this man knows that I've arrived at his house, and now however many minutes has gone by, it was several minutes. I had to park very far away, and he has not once called to check on me, to see why I haven't come to the house yet. Not at all. And I'm just like,
What is going on?
and at this point, I will say, looking back, I know he was mad about something absolutely ridiculous and not my fault. But at this time, there was no way I knew. I had no clue that something was wrong with him because he never communicated that. It wouldn't be something that you would recognize would be wrong. No one would just know this was wrong with him. He just had things he decided he was mad about. And I had no clue besides the fact that he was being a little cold. And then this. And so I was just confused as hell. And mind you, this is a man who's transitioned into this from completely the opposite. He was so kind. He was so giving. He was so affectionate. He was so gentlemanly. He was so chivalrous. So everything. The nicest person you could ever meet. And then this. And I was just very confused. And so I'm literally standing in this man's driveway and I don't know what to do. And so I wait and then I call him again. No answer. I can hear people in the back of his house. I know he's back there. I hear him. I can hear him laughing. And then I can hear other voices. And I'm just like,
Okay, maybe he just set his phone down. He obviously has other company, and maybe just didn't remember to look at the phone, just got caught up, other people talking, and just maybe overlooked it.
so I was like,
I don't want to stand out here anymore.
so I decided
I'm gonna go through the gate.
I was very anxious about it. I really didn't want to do it, but I felt like at the time didn't have a lot of other options, and I didn't want to stand out there awkward in his driveway any longer. So as I came around the corner, I see that there are people there. There are people that I haven't met before. I don't think anybody there I had met at this point. And then I see him. He's sitting at the table directly in front of me as I come through the gate, and he's in the middle of laughing a little bit. He has like a pleasant look on his face, okay? As his eyes come up and go to meet with mine as he sees me walk through his gate, as I'm saying hello, as soon as his eyes meet my eyes, he literally stops laughing and he's like, I felt it so, it hit me like,
What are you doing here?
it's like it felt like that energy. And then immediately it kind of went away. I was so uncomfortable. That was the most awkward moment. These people are here that I don't know. And at that point, I technically didn't really know him all that well. We had been together for maybe 3 months. And so I just started over explaining. I'm like,
I tried to call you, and I didn't know what to do. I always see people come through the gate, and I just didn't want to stand out there. I just decided to come through the gate.
and he was just like,
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
he was making it so awkward. Like he could see that I was obviously uncomfortable. He did not raise up to greet me as I was stumbling, trying to over-explain myself, clearly uncomfortable, clearly feeling awkward. He was not like butting in to rescue me from that. He was just like, and everyone was just being quiet as I rambled. And then I just tried to save face and I was like,
Oh, hi, I'm glad to see you.
and just tried to be confident in the situation, even though I was feeling really crappy from that reaction and feeling really embarrassed. I just said hi to everyone and I just went over and I hugged him. He did not get up. He always got up. He always got up to greet me, at the very least. And he did not greet me. He just stayed sitting and he wasn't being rude besides, all that body language, but he wasn't being warm at all. And I'm telling you, there was no argument that I knew of at all between us. Whatever he was upset about, I had no clue about it. I was very confused. And I just kind of tried to act like it wasn't happening like that and just go on with hanging out like we normally would. And eventually throughout that night, he warmed up to me at some point and started kind of acting like his self that I knew. And so, of course, I just let it go. I didn't think anything of it past that until far into the future when I'm looking back and reflecting on what the hell did I just go through for the last 3.5 years. And I just remembered that, and that was crazy. That was the first sign of his absolute contempt for me in a very subtle moment. And so when you're going up to greet somebody, watch the way they first look when they look at you and they recognize that it's you before they put on whatever reaction they want you to see. Take note of what their eyes tell you when they first look at you. And don't get confused with resting bee face, okay? Because they might have resting bee face. It's once they have seen you. It's like one little sweet spot in there, but you'll know it if you see it. It's wild. One really important thing to note, though, about contempt, because it seems so straightforward. It's like when someone's being rude to you, right? It's when someone's cussing at you, when someone's yelling at you, when someone's being abusive, when someone's being mean, okay? But wait, there's more, okay? As we saw in the definition, contempt is also present sometimes in a covert way. So contempt can creep in without it being so blatant. And that's kind of how it came in for me. It can be one of two things. It can be people who are actually really nice people, like they're not mean, they don't want to be mean, and they're actually being so frustrated constantly in this relationship that they're in, regardless of whose fault and who is what. You know, most relationships, it's a lot more of a, there's two sides, you know? It's two people that did things right, did things wrong, and it was a mixture. Okay, so that's how most relationships are. And so regardless of who is actually, you know, doing anything wrong to each other, it's just that some people are not compatible. And if it reaches a point of contempt where someone's been frustrating you to no end, it's almost like you can't stand this person anymore. And so people that are really nice, especially if someone is being rude to them, maybe their contempt could come out this way because they're going to be holding it all in. And then also, the more often way that this one comes out and shows up is in people who are having a character disturbance, who are actually doing this knowingly, who are manipulating you, who are emotionally abusive, who are trying to control you. Your covert narcissists, the ones that are always doing it in a backhanded way, an underlying way, to where maybe it's not recognizable to anyone that's around, but it's done in completely plain sight and people miss it. And so the way that they do this is by making jabs at you, being sarcastic, making little digs that they want to pass off as jokes. They'll do this a lot. They'll do it all the time. It'll be about things that you know are not jokes. It'll be about things that they very well know are not jokes. You've discussed it probably. It'll be little digs that seem like they don't make sense. Like there's a part they're leaving out, but you'll know something's up with it. And it will feel very rude and intentional because it will be done to make a mockery of you, to humiliate or embarrass you. It will be done to condescend to you. That's a really high up one. If someone's being condescending to you in a relationship, they're talking down to you, it's a great sign that they feel contempt for you. If they talk to you like you're a child, they slow their words down like you're dumb, things like that. Or if it's a man doing it to a woman, sometimes it will be mansplaining. Mansplaining can show condescension and it can reveal an underlying belief that they believe they're superior to you and they're talking down to you. They think you're below them. And then some gestures, some body language that demonstrates contempt could be as simple as rolling your eyes as soon as someone's talking. You know, people could roll their eyes when they're frustrated, but if someone's rolling their eyes while their partner is talking, rolling their eyes at their partner, or if they're talking, you choose to turn the complete opposite direction and not look at them while they are speaking, that's a pretty good sign of contempt. Or if you sigh, they start talking and you're like, they didn't say anything yet, really. They just started speaking. Their partner is sighing. That's contempt. They bug you by simply existing. It's probably contempt. So watch out for that. So now that you know what the Four Horsemen are, what their actual definition is, what can cause them to come into your relationship, and what effects they have on your relationship, you now know that your relationship cannot survive so long as these Four Horsemen continue to be present in it. So in comes the most important question. If I have these in my relationship, what do I do? Is my relationship doomed? For sure. As soon as I see one of these horses. And the answer to that, I would say, is no. And John Gottman and Julie Gottman agree with that. And so there are antidotes that you can swoop in with as the hero for your relationship, and all things considered, depending on if they go well and if it works out the way that it would need to, you could save that relationship. There are ways, but there are very few and very specific ways. Okay? You might say,
even if contempt is here?
and I understand your worry on that, and it's warranted. I would say, based on what John and Julie Gottman claim about contempt, I would say that most times there's not going to be an antidote and there's not going to be a way to repair that relationship. But what do I know from life in general? Let me tell you what I know from life in general. I know that you can't say never and you can't say always about almost anything. And contempt is no different. And you should never say there's no way, there's never going to be a relationship that you could rescue that from. And I don't even think we need to make it that dramatic. I think that, as John and Julie Gottman do certify, they do say there is a way to come back from contempt. It's just not very common. It doesn't commonly happen. More common, much more overwhelmingly common, is irreparable. However, there is a remedy, and if you can do it with perseverance, put your best effort forward, stay committed, and you can get both people bought in on it. Both people to admit the problems that are there in the relationship, the horsemen, how they're bringing them in, how they're reacting to them, and get on board with sticking with the remedy, tried and true, on to the end and further. Then you could absolutely, there is a way to turn all of these around. And that is what I'm going to get into in my very next episode. Okay, so click that little bell down there. And once again, if you're not subscribed yet, don't make me tell you again. Okay.
Do it.
And click that bell so you can get the notification for when the next episode comes out. And I will give you the perfect antidote for each of these horsemen. The fact that you're watching these videos proves that you're on an elevated level. You are taking the time to develop yourself, to put in the work, to figure out what needs to go into relationships to make them last. And that's something to say. That's something to be proud of. That's why you're good people. Until next time, guys, I love you. You're amazing. See ya. Bye.